Okay, this video is going to deal with our last concept of this chapter, and that is methods with return values. What you should have is it'd be best if you had this code here printed out so you can write on it. I know some of you can't do that, and I really wish there was a way to do this, but it's really a lot easier to take notes on this if you have the code on a printout and then write these notes down. Anyways, if you don't have that capability at this time, just do the best you can with this. The other thing is that we have all these notes here that ideally you should write these down and then watch the video and take notes and see how it relates. That's up to you as far as what you want to do, but at some point you should have these written down so that you can use your notes on the test. So you want to make sure your notes are printed out or written by hand so that you can use them for the test to make it more effective when you do take the test. The thing here is that, again, we're talking about methods with return values. Now, the method headers, which I have in yellow, those are landmarks, and so they're in yellow. Method headers that use int, double, or string instead of void are used when a method has a return value. So the programs that we've written lately, so meal cost calculator here, you notice this has void, public static void. That means there's no return value for that method. The eat pickles one, this is public static void. There's no return value, and so but now we're going to deal with a methods that have return values. So what they're going to do is they're going to look like this: public static int, and then the method name, public static double, public static string. Those indicate that this method is going to return some value back to the calling method. Now, the calling method in our case has really been the main method. The main method calls the meal cost calc method, and so these indicate that there's going to be a value that's returned to that calling method. Now, the data type displayed between static and the name of the method is called a return type. So right here, this is called a return type. Return type. So really all it is it's a data type. So int, double, string. But what it means, the return type, what that refers to is the data type of the return value. Now, it's easy to tell what's being returned because the return value is passed to the method call with a return statement. So I have the return statement in blue. The return statement, if you use a return statement, if you have a return value to pass back to the calling method, the return statement has to be the last line of the method. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. So it's got to be done doing all of its tasks and then return that value. So return statements look like number 20. And I have some other examples here: return number of trees, return cost of meal, etc. So all of these variables, these are all variable calls right here, and these variables have a value in them. So whatever their return value is going to be the return value of the method. So for example, when the compiler comes to line 14 and it recognizes that there's a return value and it receives the arguments from the method call, and then it does its calculations and tasks and things. So here cost per burger is 3.5 and cost per soda is 2.5, and then the cost per burger is multiplied by the number of burgers. Well, the number of burgers comes from the parameter variable. So let's say up here it was 2, and so 2, and then cost per soda is going to be 2.5 times the cost of the soda by the number of sodas, which is 3. And it does all that calculation. What is this? This is 5 plus 7.5, so which is 12.5. So this meal cost, the value of meal cost, that it's storing is 12.5. And so then here is the this is going to return the value of meal cost. Well, what is the value of meal cost? Well, it went through all this code here, tasks and stuff that the meal cost calc carried out to come up with 12.5 for the meal cost. So notice that this meal cost is a double, and it has to match whatever the data type of this variable is, has to match the return type. Otherwise this will not work. You'll get error messages. So if the return type is an int, then the variable whose value is being returned to the method call must be an int. Okay, string, then this has to be a string. So that's how that works. So the return value, see, the return is the last line of the method, and the return type refers to the data type of the return value. So that's what I was trying to get across here. Return type of the method is the data type of the return value. Okay, so let's take a look at how this goes, and we're going to go from the beginning and kind of show you how a method call is working here. I will mention this: the method call of a method having a return value is assigned to a variable in the calling method. So up to this point, we have had our method calls have been on a line by themselves. So you have the name of the method being called, which matches this name, and you have parentheses, and then you might have arguments inside the parentheses, and sometimes you won't. That method calls on a line by itself. We go over here, we have the same thing. We have the method call, because it's got a method name calling this method, pickles and pickles, and then in this case it does have a couple of arguments, but it's all on a line by itself. But now that things have changed when you have a return value. And so, where'd my doc? Oh, there it went. Okay, so in this case, what happens is we have burgers is 2, sodas is 3, and now you have the method call. Now notice the method call is not on the line by itself. It's being assigned to a variable. And so this is what's different. This is how you can tell that this method is going to have a return value, because that return value is going to be assigned to a variable. That's how you tell the difference. And so if you have some variable assigned the method call, that means you must have a return statement in that method that's being called. In this case, we have a method call. Now, of course, the compiler is going to, it sees a data type and variable, so it's going to set up a memory location, and it's going to name it total cost, and so it's not going to store anything yet because it doesn't know the value of the method call. And then here, the method call, as we know already, it calls this method into action right here, and it passes the number of burgers and number of sodas. So the burgers is a variable call. These are both arguments, but they're variable calls. So the return value of burgers is 2. The return values of sodas is 3. The 2, the argument, is passed to the parameter variable b. Now the parameter variable is not int b. Int is a data type, and I still hear people saying, well, the variable is int b. No, the variable is b. It is an int. And then sodas is passed to the variable, the parameter variable s. And so now you have, then you go to the, you don't go to the next line down. The method call takes you to the method header of the same name. And we see that we have a return type, which is double, and this int b sets up a memory location b, and it stores the argument being passed to it. And then you have s is being declared because it's got a data type and a variable, so we have to have data types here. And it has the 3 that's stored, that's been passed to it. And so then now the method begins to do its tasks, whether it be close the front door, or to close the sliding doors, or to erase the whiteboard, things that we talked about when we introduced methods, the actions. And so what are the actions of meal cost calc? Well, first of all, it declares a variable and stores a 3.5 in it. Then it declares another variable and stores a 2.5 in it. And then it declares a third variable and does the calculations using variable calls. Some variables are local, as we call them. They've been declared in this method. And some variable calls are calling parameter variables, whose return values are here. And so it does these calculations. All right, and then it comes up with the total cost of 12.5, or the meal cost of 12.5. And now the next line is to return this value to the main method, because now the main method is going to use the return value. Here, the meal cost calc used the values of the arguments, because we can't do variable calls. Variable calls are not how you get one value from one method to another. So remember, we did say once that not only do you pass data through a method call, but we did mention earlier that you can pass data using a return statement. So 2 ways to pass data from one method to another, not with variable calls, but with method calls and return statements. Those are the two ways that we're passing data from one method to another. So here we're passing the 2, which originated in the main method, and the 3, we're passing those to this method. So that's one way. And now we're taking the meal cost, which is 12.5, and we're going to pass that back. Now I'm going to get rid of all this stuff. We're going to take this 12.5, and as we said, the return statement has to be the last statement. So now we're at the end of method return to method call. And this is why I've been saying return to method calls, and a lot of you don't do that when you're numbering your numbers, your line numbers in order. But I've been telling you, the saying is return to method call. So return to method call. If there's nothing to do, you just move down to the next line. In this case, because I warned you, I said there's going to be a time when you are going to do something with that. And so we return to method calls, I've been saying all along. And so that return value, the 12.5, is returned to the method call. A variable call has a return value like this and this. A method call has a return value that it gets from the return statement. So now when you look at the line, it says double tote cost is assigned 12.5. So the 12.5 gets assigned to tote cost. So the method call of a method having a return value is assigned a variable in the calling method, which I just showed you. Here's the method call being assigned to a variable. And so here's an example. Now you could, of course, declare the variable tote cost before and then assign it here. It doesn't matter. But anyways, the return statement of the cost method might look like this. So that's what I have here. If the value of meal cost is 25.12, or in our case 12.5, then that would be assigned to tote cost in the calling method. So this amount here gets stored in this variable here, because this variable is assigned the method call, or in other words, the value of the method, the return value of the method call. And now that 12.5 is used by the main method. In this case, it's being used to be displayed on the screen. It's used in a print statement. Then of course you have the end of the method. Alright, so that is how methods with return values operate. You have a, so just by quick review here, is you have a method call that's being assigned to a variable. And then you have a method header that uses int, double, or string, the return type, between static and the name of the method. You have a return statement at the end of the method whose data type, who's calling a variable whose data type is the same as the return type in the method header, and it's being returned to a method call and gets stored in a variable that it's assigned to, so that it can be used by the calling method. Right? That's how it works, and I hope that makes sense.